Give on the go. Give with ease. Seven platforms, one system. Give from everywhere. SecureGive.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're glad that all of you are able to join us. I say we've got a very large crowd today. It shows you how much interest there is in church giving and giving campaigns, which is the subject of our topic today. We've got a lot of data. This is brand new data that we have run just at the end of this year. I cannot wait to share it with all of you. My name, if I haven't met you yet, is Daniel Buford. I'm Chief Operating Officer at SecureGive. And I have with me a very special guest, one that I've worked with quite a bit, Jonathan Pitts. Jonathan works with Dunham out of Dallas, Texas. Jonathan, welcome. Tell the folks a little bit about yourself. Just introduce yourself.
Yeah, glad to be with you guys today. Jonathan Pitts here. I am a chief strategist at Dunham. I've been with Dunham for, I want to say, a little more than 4 years. And I'm also a pastor myself. I am a stewardship pastor at Church of the City in Franklin, Tennessee, and work on everything from our current capital campaign that we're working on all the way down to just kind of the day-to-day blocking and tackling and fundraising. So that's a little bit about me.
Very cool. Well, I appreciate you being here. I am so excited to share this information because, it's something that's very relevant. Some of these things we think we know the answer to anecdotally, but it's always when you see where the numbers are, when the data and the respondents, it really helps you from a planning standpoint. Hey, real quick, just some housekeeping things. We've got a lot of people on this webinar. So just to make things easy, we are going to be taking questions. We've got team members that are going to be working the chat. So at any point during today's webinar, go ahead and send those questions in. We will get to that. We're going to try to get to that at the end of the webinar just to make it a little bit easier. So if that works for everybody, just go ahead and put your questions or your comments in the chat. We will get to those. I'm gonna go ahead and get into our data so that we can kind of get started. But our format, some of these things I'm going to go through some of these slides. Some of them will be intuitive. Some of them we're going to want to kind of hover on and really discuss. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, just so you know, everyone, I'll pull this up. So we partnered with Dunham to do this research, and we intentionally waited until after the election because we wanted to minimize, any distraction or anything that could skew any data. So when I say this is recent, this is, something that began end of November, and we got this, really at the end of the year. So this is very accurate, very fresh data. Some of the things that we are going to talk about today, I think are vitally important to church and understanding fundraising and capital campaigns. And from a high level, one of the questions that we wanted to set out to answer is, are capital campaigns relevant right now today? Are they still effective? And how does that impact our overall general fund? These are the questions we're going to answer. We're going to answer these today. And just so everybody knows, because this is always one of the more popular questions, we'll also make this information available to you after the presentation. So don't worry. I want you to just be able to relax and sort of take in the data. So let's talk about really quickly, Jonathan, just an overview of general giving today. This was something for me, this slide right here, this was kind of intuitive, right? I think everybody on the call would agree this is something you would expect. Of the churches that we polled, 73% of them said that growth or decline of membership impacts giving. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't think there's anything groundbreaking in that. 62% saw more giving due to membership gains. 27% said they had no change in giving with membership, and really 11 were the ones that said that they saw a decline giving with less members. So that in and of itself, I would say is probably what most people would guess. I want to go on to this one. So inflation, we posed it to them in numerous different ways to get these answers. Of inflation and economic factors, do they have a negative impact on their giving? most people said that, they saw less giving due to economic factors. Again, 58%, over half. So, overwhelmingly, this was affirming that people are seeing a change and an impact in their giving, from membership, but also from economic and inflation. Any surprises there on that data?
Yeah, I would say no surprise for me. And I also want to introduce one of my coworkers and our chief advancement officer, Erik Rogers at Dunham and Company, who's having a little trouble getting from backstage into the
Welcome,
live.
Erik.
Eric's on as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd say no surprises for me. And I'm in I'm in multiple current campaigns. One as a kind of practitioner, as a pastor myself. And I would say this season, obviously, you've got a lot going on with inflation, a lot of people impacted by inflation. So it's not, honestly, I think this would be pretty accurate. And so when you're in a campaign, thinking well through supporting your, whether it be members of a church or constituents of a nonprofit through that and helping them see how they can actually fulfill their pledge, if it's a pledge, is something you're going to have to do in a campaign. But for me, it's not limiting the fact that we're able to complete pledges, but it's definitely having an impact on what people think they can give or how they think they can give it. Different ways of giving.
Yeah. What's interesting for me, and I won't get ahead of myself for some of the things that we're going to share, but it is important to remember that people are seeing less giving from economic factors than inflation. And that fact is what makes some of the other data that we uncovered very surprising. I'm going to go ahead and move forward here. On average, responding churches teach on giving approximately 6 times a year. Of all of our respondents, it was an average of 6 times per year teaching on giving. Now that, my church, Stevens Creek in Augusta, Georgia, this is something we talk about, generosity. I think we do a fantastic job of reminding our congregation of their generosity and showing the ways that our churches stewards that generosity. But this is something you guys work with a lot of churches. You coach them on campaigning. How does that feel as far as a number as to what you would recommend the church do? Is 6 times a year too much? Is it not enough?
I'll chime in, Pitts, real quick. And I would simply say, I think this is generous for some churches.
Mm-hmm.
I think just mentioning it from stage does happen from time to time, but truly teaching, I would love to see our congregations being taught every other month. 6 times a year on just the ways in which we can come alongside through our worship of giving, to be faithful and consistent to give what the Lord is calling us to do.
Mm-hmm.
Give as a church, as a individual. And so, for those listening that are overseeing a congregation, I would highly recommend at least weaving this in on a consistent basis, maybe even more so than you already are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, the beautiful thing about a Sunday gathering is you have the opportunity to actually preach a message on giving every single week. I know churches have very different philosophies on how they handle an offering moment, if they do an offering moment. At our church, we're trying to do the best we can to actually just use that moment to steer people and disciple people through giving. So it's like with giving, especially if you already have an offering moment built in to your message, you really have the opportunity to every single week, even if it's 30 seconds, you have an opportunity to teach on giving. So I definitely would agree with Erik. I think, or with you, Daniel, even that it's for most churches to do it 6 times a year, like a full message that's probably generous. But I think I think our congregation, especially at this point where they're being discipled around their giving everywhere else they turn, we should be doing it more, than everybody else is discipling them on their giving. We should probably be doing it more.
Yeah, I'll tell you, if you're a pastor on this call and you are perhaps nervous or anxious about talking to the congregation about raising funds or talking about money, stay tuned, because I think some of the things you're going to find out here in a moment may surprise you. They certainly surprised me. And again, we get into this, we're about to start talking about capital campaigns. I'm a data person. I love data because data tells a story. It's not emotional. It's not biased. It's straightforward. This data we are presenting to you as we get these results. This is not created to prop up a sales pitch or a product. This is data from your peers all over the country. So I want to caveat that this is just raw information. How about this? Nearly 7 out of 10 churches surveyed say that they've conducted a capital campaign. Any surprise there?
No, but I do think it's important to note that every church is going to constitute a capital campaign in their own context. If they have a project and it is substantial dollars over their annual budget, oftentimes we categorize that as a capital campaign. I talked to plenty of organizations that, hey, we've got a $500,000 additional need for a project. Let's run a capital campaign. And I think for them, that for that situation, it is a capital campaign. But I think there are obviously smaller campaigns and larger campaigns, and typically in most contexts, a larger capital campaign engulfing multiple years to be able to run the campaign. Revenue that is way above what the annual budget is. Often we'll get into a lot of that data, kind of bridging into larger campaigns here in a little bit.
So this was one that was interesting. So I can imagine that a lot of people in this call, if you've, like the numbers say, if you've run a capital campaign, this has to be a native idea to you. Generally, pastors said that their boards view capital campaigns positively. I know this is always one of the things a lot of people, they don't know how their congregants or their board is going to react. But seeing that, 46% of them were very or somewhat positive. So you would say even with the neutral combined with that, the overwhelming majority, only 19% of the respondents said that their boards viewed capital campaigns as a negative. Views of the pastors that we surveyed regarding capital campaigns, they've grown more positive than negative. That is an improvement over the last time with that. How about this? Of our surveyed, just 36%. Now that's interesting because we talked about how many people in our respondents have done a capital campaign, but only 36% of them, that's just a little over a third, have done a campaign recently. So here's why that's interesting to me, and I'd love to hear your feedback. Because of the people that did that, look at these numbers. 75% of all of the people that conducted a campaign have met or exceeded the goal. Only you look at, you've got 11% fell short of the goal by less than 10%. That's pretty strong. Only 15% fell short of the goal by something less than 90%. That's pretty impressive. That was surprising to me because when you think about funding, whether it's a building project or anything, you think about funding. People have an idea that it's going to be a challenge, and certainly it is. But wow, it's like look at the success rates, and these are real people that are responding to this. Does that surprise you that it's that high?
Well, I do know over the last 5 years, especially, it feels weird to continue to reference COVID, but it is relevant in the discussion.
Yeah.
COVID caused a fear amongst the country of, is this the right time to do something like this? And if forget the immediate impact of the pandemic, I'm talking even 2022, 2023.
Right.
There were quite a few conversations where it was, hey, let's call time out for just a minute. Let's let everything get back to normal, and then we'll reconsider engaging in a campaign. So to see that just over 1/3 conducted a campaign over the last few years, however, 75% met or exceeded their goal. I think there was a lot of people that held back because of whatever you want to call it. I would call it in a little bit of trepidation to step forward. And yet those that did step forward still saw amazing, great response. Why? Because the congregation is still behind the impact that we're trying to do together. And oftentimes that campaign is to expand or to increase our impact either in the community or around the world. And your congregation, regardless of situation in the economy, oftentimes they're going to rise to the occasion. So it doesn't surprise me to see the 75% success, but it is eye-opening to see only 1/3 really stepped into a campaign recently.
Yeah, no, I agree. That just my eyes are drawn to that because with anything, if I find something with that high of a success rate, it's going to be top of mind for me to consider.
Yeah, the thing I would add to that, my guess would be, we don't have the data on this, but my guess would be that the 1/3 of those churches and leaders that stepped into casting their vision firmly believed in their vision, and that's what I really believe it comes down to with a capital campaign. Do you firmly believe in your vision? If you do, you're going to have more peace about moving forward with it. So in that data, what I look at is go, yeah, these guys were these churches, these leadership teams were firm about their vision and where God was taking them. And I'm not surprised that when somebody is clear about their vision, that they, by and large, find success, see success, because congregations are behind them. So,
yeah. No, I agree. That's good. I want to camp on this slide because when I saw this is kind of one of my favorite ones. There's a lot in this. So in conducting the campaign, 79% did not experience a decrease in general fund giving. Only 13% of the respondents said that they saw a decrease in general fund giving. Now, this is something I hear this a lot. This is one of those, and frankly, if I were tasked with doing something like this myself, it'd be one of my first concerns to think, are we robbing Peter to pay Paul? Is it going to come from our general fund? If we ask people to make a donation, is it just going to come from their regular gifts or their tithes or offering? So that was surprising in a very positive way. This is something, if you're on this call and you have thought about doing even just a general campaign for the general fund, that's a very encouraging thing to see. Let me read this one real quick and I get your feedback. The 75% of pledgers fulfilled their pledge. So 79% success rate with not having a dip in the general fund giving, and then 3 out of 4 of the pledgers fulfilled their pledge. That's very high. You guys do this every day, I understand. Does that surprise you at all?
Well, 75% is, I would call the average across the board for majority of campaign counsel and those that are helping run campaigns. We see quite a bit higher uptick, but there's some stewardship strategy we implement to see a better success rate. But 75% is really kind of industry standard. So it's not surprising to see the meet those statistics.
Okay.
And I would say on the previous stat with what was it, 13% that experienced the dip, the 79% that didn't. I really believe that that's going to come down to conditioning. What you communicate is what's going to happen. And so I think there needs to be clarity. And for the churches that did see that, there was likely a lack of clarity in the fact that this ask was above and beyond what was there. And that's one of the things you need to do, is continue to over and over condition your congregation to know what you're doing and what you're asking them to do. And so
that's good.
For those the 79% that had success, my guess is there was clear communication around what the ask was, because I think people naturally, it would be easy to rob Peter to pay Paul if there's not any conversation and communication around that. So sorry, I don't know if I cut you off, Daniel.
No, not at all. Not at all. That's good. I'm looking down. I'm going to cover all of these. I'm going to get to some. I'm going to ask everybody. We've got a massive amount of people on this webinar, which I love. I'm happy to share this. I actually want to be able to capitalize on that. I would love if you know where the chat is in the bottom corner. When we get to some of these, I want to ask. I would love for you to just reply with a yes or a yes or a no if this is what you were experiencing at your church. But moving on, the 68%, they tracked each pledge. 54% of our respondents secured lead gifts before going public. My personal opinion, that's a really big part of it. Knowing your congregation, knowing who, the people that they just have the gift of generosity. Maybe there's some of your larger donors, being able to have those conversations and secure, significant portions of it going into it. Is that something that you advise all of your churches to do?
Well, I'm going to answer that question by answering both bullet points. And actually, if you wouldn't mind, go back to the stats, just because I'm going to read the 68%. Thank you. But the 68% tracked, first and foremost, capital campaigns. If we're doing a smaller campaign, we're going to a handful of folks, then we're able to obviously probably stay above the threshold of using a CRM to utilize a pledge system to keep up with the multitude of people. So if I've got 15 or 20 people that are going to help me reach that million or even million and a half in projects, I can get away with not tracking pledges. The reality, though, is a lot of organizations don't have a solid enough CRM. And to be honest, kind of raise their hand and say, I just don't even know where to turn. And in that situation, finding a firm and finding a system that's able to take care of everything is imperative, especially when you're doing a large campaign with hundreds, if not thousands, of our constituents saying yes in a pledge format. To answer that, then also going to the 54%, if I ever could beg, if I could beg the country to do one specific thing, it is please go through a silent phase of your campaign and bring those that are near and dear to your efforts and can put a zero behind that check. The Lord has blessed them financially. They are aligned with the why behind what we're doing. Go and spend time with them and ask them if they would be faithful to this campaign to stand with you. If you do that, you're going to save yourself time and most importantly, time. But you're also going to save yourself money in the campaign by conducting a silent phase at the beginning.
Right on. Yeah, as far as your pledges, man, if only there was a payment software company that offered that.
If only.
I'm joking. We do. Yeah. How about 43% hired an outside consultant. I could see that. I mean, my takeaway, my mind goes to the opposite of that. Clearly you've got 57% that didn't. They did it on their own. Not really. I don't guess there's any surprises there. That's probably shakes out. This is the one I'm very interested in. 39% accepted gifts of stock. So I want to camp on this for a minute. This is the one I would ask you, our attendees. I'd love to know, at your church or your organization, do you talk about stock donations? Do you accept stock donations? Maybe you talked about, cryptocurrencies, stocks, estates. I'd love to know, if, just with a yes or no, if your church talks about or accepts stocks. I'm seeing a ton of yeses pop up. This is something, man, you really need to get the importance of this, because a lot of, just being candid, a lot of pastors maybe don't think about it. Maybe they don't know about it. Many congregants don't think about it. But, for your members that have stocks and maybe they've gone up, one of the benefits of donating that stock to the church, you can realize the full, market value of that stock from a tax deduction. But also, if your stock has gone up, if you sell it, you are paying capital gains taxes. Everybody knows that. If you donate it, you don't. That's a huge deal, because you can take the deduction, and there's incentives for that at the full market value of the stock, but you're not paying capital gains taxes. This is vitally important to remind people around the end of year, when people are, they're calculating what their tax liability is going to be, they're preparing their donations. Just reminding them that you have the availability to be able to accept that is a huge thing. You will be surprised at how many people are prompted that didn't think about it. And, I know certainly our church does. SecureGive offers that. We help churches receive cryptocurrency and stock gifts. But I really encourage you, at your organization, if you aren't letting your congregation know that that is an option, that's a big deal. All right. So moving on to, the next 21%.
Hey, Daniel, I just saw that somebody had asked, how do I do that? And so the thing I want to say, I mean, obviously SecureGive offers that, the administration on that, but there are platforms that would allow you to do that. Don't cost your team anything more administratively. SecureGive being one of those. So I just wanted to mention that before we moved on.
Yeah. And let me just say, this is not a sales plug. I mean this honestly from an information. If that's something you are interested in, my team will help you. They will talk to you about it. I'll show you how we do. It is very simple. We handle that. Literally, we liquidate. We take it through. We have a party that we work with. They liquidate the stocks. We put the funds in your account. It is one of the simplest things you can do, and our team can show it to you and explain it to you. And even if you don't use SecureGive, we'll be happy to show you how it's done because it's really something your church needs to be able to do. So, keep that top of mind. We can talk about that at the end, or if you want to reach out to us, I promise you we will consult with you on how to do that.
And there are several other non-cash gifts that, there are many people that can't give even a major gift in their cash that would be able to give a major gift to another non-cash gift. So it's a conversation for another day, but it's definitely every church should be thinking about it and kind of leaning into it. Eric's chomping at the bit here.
Go ahead, Eric.
I'll tell you, and one of my favorite things about capital campaigns and merging that with planned giving is when you start to express why we're doing what we're doing, you start to galvanize your congregation to say,
Sure.
yes, this is exactly why I'm at this church. This is exactly why I'm a part of this body. And you now go through a planned gift. Let's say that someone says, you know what, I want to put 15% of my total assets in my will that's going to ultimately come to my congregation when we pass. Well, you may not realize those dollars during your campaign, but having galvanized your community, they now say yes to who you are and what we are as a body of believers moving forward and making a difference. Even if you don't realize the dollars in the campaign itself, oftentimes those dollars are going to pay off in the next campaign. Secondarily, when somebody puts you in their will or their bequest or in a bequest, you'll find that their giving today will actually go up. Why? Because they've made the rational decision that I'm a part of this. This is a part of me. This is part of my DNA. And I want to be part of it, not just tomorrow, but today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I'm looking at that because the next point that we have 21% accepted gifts of real or personal property. This is, and I'm sensitive when I say this, just understanding over the next really 10 to 20 years, over the next 2 decades, as we see the boomers generation, we are looking at, I think it's 71 to 74 trillion dollars. It's the largest transfer of wealth from generation down to, millennials and Gen X that's going to be handed down over the next 20 years. And sometimes it feels kind of icky to talk about wealth and things like that, but just practically, one of the things we know we're not ashamed of is that, giving is a sacred privilege that the church has, and we want to, it's like in Exodus, whoever's heart is moved to give, right? It's about accepting the things that people want to give. In the old days, people would pay the doctor with, a chicken or eggs or whatever they could, whatever they had. My point is people have assets, and maybe it's not just, what you're collecting in the offering plate. People have, property, they have stocks, and just, letting people know what is available for them to give. It really does have a big effect because you'll be surprised. People want to donate. They want to give. So anyway, I really liked that. I really hope everybody on this call is aware of that and how important, the next really decade or so just for, legacy giving is. I'd really encourage you to put some thought into that. And then lastly on this slide, 11% use specialized software. You guys may know, I certainly know there's a lot of software. Some of it, it's not inexpensive that is for this process. SecureGive has a function that is built in. There's no extra cost for it that does that. Our customers certainly have that benefit, but I would say, there's plenty of options out there that, they won't break the bank for you to do this. But anyway, any other surprises from this slide before we move on, guys?
No.
Okay. All right, let's talk about this. Of those who gave to the church's recent capital campaigns, now this is interesting to me. 2% gave a non-cash gift or stock or property. 22% gave beyond their original commitment, and 17% gave $10,000 or more. So I'll let you go first. I want to see what does anything jump off at you? Does anything meaningful to you? Because this to me tells a story. But what are anything about that surprise you?
Did you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, nothing surprises me here. I would say, can you put the stats back up just so I can look at them as I'm talking here?
You see them?
The 2% that gave non-cash gifts or of stock or property, it might only represent 2% of the people that gave, but that could be an outsized proportion of your actual
Right.
dollars in your
Bingo.
campaign, like significant dollars beyond. The average person might not be able to give again a major gift out of their income, but they could definitely do so out of some kind of a savings, some kind of a retirement or stocks. I've got somebody I'm working with that just got an inheritance of tens of thousands of dollars of stock. So it's like the reality is people have access to dollars beyond their cash, and so that 2% actually represents a lot of dollars. Other than that, I think you'd be surprised at how many people within your organization could give a larger gift than you ever expected if they were only asked for something that had a vision that was compelling enough to give beyond that case and beyond their tithing. So that's the only thing I'd share, Eric.
Well, the 22% is the thing that stands out to me, and very common, especially in larger campaigns. I've got a multi-year pledge. If we do a good job of stewarding the relationships throughout the years, you'll find that as long as I keep in front of the donor, in front of that congregant, what they committed to, how much have they given against that, how much do they have left. As long as I keep that in front of them consistently throughout the year, you're going to find that oftentimes they're going to fulfill it sooner than they planned on fulfilling it. And secondarily, if we make sure that they realize how grateful we are, so you just have a level of generosity that makes them feel loved and appreciated, you'll see them call back up and say, hey, put me down for another X. And they'll sign up for a second gift. Why? Because they're in line with what the Lord is doing through this church, and they want to be a part of that success. And the Lord's blessed them to be able to fulfill their pledge early. And my experience is you'll see it's uncommon for them the majority to not sign up again.
Here's what's interesting to me. This data lines up perfectly with what we are seeing. Look, SecureGive has been helping churches for 20 years, over 20 years. We've got a lot of data. So when it comes to understanding trends over the last 2 decades, this is something we're seeing in the last few years. The number of givers overall in the United States is down, but giving itself is up. People are giving more. And so it's very interesting. This lines up with what we see in real time with data in the United States. And then that last part, 17% of their capital campaign donors gave over $10,000. So I thought that was interesting as well. Again, we're going to share these out with everybody. I see some questions on that. All right, so let's look at this. The pastors surveyed said the top 4 reasons a church should launch a capital campaign were. Really, I don't know. This makes sense to me. New construction on existing property was our largest, 75%. Adding to existing facilities at 73%. Rebuilding existing facilities at 61%, and then starting a church in a different location, 58%. Now, for those of you on the call, if it's breaking your brain that these percentages don't add up to 100, understand that these are questions that are on a scale of likely to not likely for these. So it's how these are constructed. So this isn't part of one pie, just to make sense of that. So what I see is a lot of people really in their mind associate a capital campaign around building or expansion projects. Is that, you guys work with tons of churches all over the United States. Is that what you see when churches reach out to you to run a capital campaign?
I think most recognize a capital campaign as some level of bricks and mortar. But I would say more and more I'm starting to see campaigns that are incorporating other programs. So, for example, being able to expand a counseling center that they do a small percentage of today. They're starting to see a greater impact in the community. They want to put that on steroids. And so part of the capital campaign is to do a full-blown 7 days a week counseling center. And they don't necessarily need more space to do it. They need more staff. They need more capabilities. They need more resources. So we see a lot of churches thinking through programmatically. What can we do? We have a storefront for our community come in and get clothing or food or fill in the blank, and we want to honor our community. And they don't need more bricks and mortar to hold more. They need more capability to serve more. And so we do see a lot more programmatic as well.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, I'm looking out at a capital project that we're doing right now at my church, Church of the City, and a lot of it is it's galvanizing what we have in terms of land and property with the other organizations in our community that we want to serve as well. So we're actually creating space for those partners to be a part of what we're doing. I would say people give the vision more than they give to anything else. So vision includes program, vision includes buildings, or it can. It's funny. I just looked in the chat and I saw somebody ask the question, "What about debt or mortgage repayment?" Which by and large, I would say that's not a great use of a capital campaign, except for the fact that I'm a part of a church organization that had a vision. Again, it goes back to vision. We had a vision to be debt-free as a church. We're now doing a capital campaign in cash. We're doing 3 buildings. It's multi-million dollar campaign, but we paid our debt off, which set us up 7 years later to actually, start this project. And so I would say if debt repayment is tied to new vision, I think it's possible, but it comes down to vision.
That's really well said. That's very true. All right, let's look at this next one. This was interesting. Congregants were more positive than negative on conducting a capital campaign. I know this is going to be something top of mind for a lot of people on the call. Obviously, some churches are probably more accustomed talking about campaigns and money. Some people are going to be afraid of, is it viewed negatively? Is there a negative connotation with money? It's not lost on me how polarizing that can be, even though it's very clearly a biblical principle. It was interesting to see this breakdown, but overall, it's pretty well split. The largest respondent was somewhat positive, with 15% very positive. So if you look at the combination of this, you can say that more congregants were positive than negative, but it certainly isn't it's not an overwhelming split here. Any surprises in that?
Well, you're always going to have your naysayers, but if you were to draw a line through the middle of that, and you're talking about kind of those that are above the line versus below the line, it comes back to what Pitts just mentioned a second ago. It's all about vision.
Yeah.
And if a congregation is shared why we're doing this and not what we're doing, I promise you're going to have more people rally behind that.
Yeah.
So, for example, if I've got a church that wants to reach out to the community and provide services to ultimately love and serve and impact the community, and we're making space in our sanctuary to be able to add to our flock, and the whole purpose is so that more can understand the gospel, you're going to see a congregation rally behind that. But if we're uncomfortable in a space and we just need more room, and I know it sounds a little cheeky, but the reality is sometimes it is positioned that way. So it is about vision and the impact we're going to make together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well done. I mean, it's important to know, in addition to the results, I want to see the approach. Was the vision cast? There's more nuance required with that. So this was kind of in that same vein. The respondents gave us the top 3 barriers for launching the capital campaign. Lack of buy-in on the goal at the top. So that really speaks to the results in that last slide. 43% concern over a decrease in general fund giving. We've already seen that the data doesn't back up the fear, right? And then lack of participation by congregants at 38%. Really and truly, I would see these three barriers, this is one of the better takeaways, really from this data is that the top barriers, the data really doesn't shake out that it's worth being a concern, certainly with the right approach. Any disagreement there?
I would just say that, number one and number three there, lack of buy-in on the goal and lack of participation by congregants. The key to, I think, kind of vetting yourself through those is just doing a bit of a listening tour at your church. When you think about having a silent campaign, doing that would include your board, that would include high-level congregants, major givers to the church already. I think it's necessary to do a bit of a listening tour with your most bought-in families to see where they're at. Typically, those families have leadership within your congregation as well. And so at Dunham, we do a capacity planning study to help churches understand that very thing. Like, is the capacity there? Is the willingness there? And that's a series of interviews, conversations, meetings behind the scenes. If you're launching a campaign and everybody in your congregation is finding that out at the same time, that's probably not the best way to launch it. So 1 and 3 are ones that are easily, I think, overcomable if you're willing to do the work. What was the middle one? I'm trying to remember. If you could keep the
concern over decrease in general fund giving.
Yeah, I think that's just obviously most of us as pastors are obviously trying to make sure that we don't disrupt our normal programming and disrupt our normal activities, from kids ministry to youth ministry to all the things that are happening. I think it's valid concern, but this one is one that you lead through, where you make it clear that you can't disrupt. You can't rob Peter to pay Paul if we're going to do this campaign. So I just think that one comes down to communication, but it's easily understandable why that's a fear, because obviously we have a job to do.
Right on.
I'm stealing that one, Pitts. I actually go back just real quick.
Yeah.
And Pitts called it a listening tour. I haven't heard that, and I love it. If you're considering a capital campaign, I promise you there's somebody, whether it's you or your staff, your board, there's somebody who probably would check some of these boxes that we're looking at right here, that maybe they're not aligned with the goal, or maybe they have concerns about, just general giving and it's going to dip, or fill in the blank on what the issue may be. And that's why the best thing for you to do, especially if you're going into a larger campaign, is take the time to go through. Some agencies call it a feasibility study. We call it a planning study. The reason we do a planning study, we just do a lot more things instead of just understanding capacity and doing some interviews. But in this, and I love that listening tour. I'm going to steal that. But
you owe me.
But this whole stop and listen, right? Listen to what your people are saying. Listen to what your staff is saying. And if you measure the right pieces, if I understand if we truly do have capacity, if I understand what our why is, like, why are we really doing this? Can I frame it in a way that makes sense? Can I put the right leadership in place so that the leadership can rally the troops to say yes? And the troops are everybody from my board, to my congregation, to my community. But if I can do the right things and listen, I can put the right plans in place. I also give myself enough time to complete this. Sometimes we think we need to do it in 12 months. And in reality, you need 2 to 3 years. So this listening tour, you heard it here, folks, from Pitts, but we're trademarking it. But anyways, that's what you need to do. I love it.
Yeah. All right, let's we always like to be concise. We always like to give some top takeaways. And then we got a ton of questions coming through on the chat. I want to make sure that we get for a time of Q&A too. So number one, this is obvious. The data does show for a fact inflation has indeed had an impact on giving. Really no surprise, but the data did prove it out. Capital campaigns ended up being more prevalent among the responding churches than we anticipated. I was surprised by that. Number 3, this was important. I think this was something good to hear that the data showed this. Boards and congregants of the responding churches were twice as likely to be more positive than negative. That's a big deal. And I think, one of the things we've seen is the more clearly you cast the vision, and you engage your donors, the higher the success rate. Number 4, less than half of the churches that responded, 43%, conducting a campaign, hired outside help. That was interesting.
And on that one, we didn't mention, or we hit it, and I just didn't mention it. A lot of churches, again, we'll call a campaign, even though they're only raising $500,000 or $1 million for a project, and they need 5 or 10 or 15 of their constituents to say yes and just get that across the line. In those type of situations, you don't need campaign counsel. You don't need somebody to help with a 9-month project. It's a big project. Please don't get me wrong. But you have those that are closest to you that you know you can pick up the phone and call. So when you see 43%, that's not including large campaigns. This is likely some small projects.
Right. Yeah, I could see that. This was, again, on Harper, this was less than half accepted non-cash gifts as contribution for the campaigns. I cannot stress enough, my personal opinion, I think that's a big deal, especially, in the coming few years. Number 6, a major barrier to conducting a capital campaign was the fear of a decrease in general giving. My personal opinion, I think this might have been one of the largest data points where one of the things we all would have assumed, the data just didn't prove this out. I mean, the fact is, overwhelmingly, people did not experience a dip in their general giving when they had a capital campaign fund. I think that's a big deal. I mean, you guys deal in this every day. That's something that I think churches need to understand. And if you're on this call and you would love to have a capital campaign to run, to raise funds for general giving, even just your general funds, excuse me. I think that should be reassuring to know. You guys agree with that?
Yeah, I would say, look, at the end of the day, fear is normal. And fear is one of those things that if we allow it to motivate us positively, it's going to cause us to think more clearly about the thing that we're afraid of and how do we avoid the thing we're afraid of. And there's one way to avoid is not do the campaign at all. The other way to avoid is to actually step into it with courage. Yeah. But also, as you do that, be very thoughtful around how you communicate to your congregation around, hey, this campaign is outside of our normal operations. In order to fund this vision, we need these dollars above and beyond what we normally bring in, above and beyond your tithes and offerings. So I do think to acknowledge the fear is okay. Yeah. And the only question is, can you walk in courage and clarity? Because what your congregation needs in that is just clarity. Right on. I think you can clarify the fears that you have with your congregation. There's something to be said about honesty and walking through life with our congregations, even as we're growing together. So that's just a part of vision casting. It is. And just because something, creates fear doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. So we're seeing that's the thing. I'm seeing a lot of questions come in along these lines. So we're going to get to this. Matter of fact, I think this is our last takeaway. We'll get into the Q&A. 8 out of 10 churches conducting a campaign didn't experience a drop in general fund giving. So that's kind of reiterate what you and I were just talking about, right? The data kind of proves that out. Let's try to, I want to be conscious of our time here, but man, we've got so many people on this webinar. I want to make sure we get to some of these questions. This is one I'm looking at, and I think this is going to be a great one for the Dunham team. How do you make a good decision on whether a campaign is asking for too much or too little from your congregation? Follow-up. Are there any metrics or formulas that you would use that could help ensure you're making a good sized yet realistic ask? That's a great question.
Well, I think Pitts is going to come back to vision on this one, but this goes back to you're now listening to her. Pause and plan.
Yeah.
Ask the right. First and foremost, if you don't have the funding, right, through the feasibility study, if you don't have the funding in your congregation, it's really hard to finish your campaign out.
Yeah.
So how do I avoid asking for too much? I got to make sure that I actually have the funds within my congregation. So if I'm a church of 1,000 people and I need to go raise $60 million, well, hopefully you live in, a very, very affluent area, and the average capability per person can help you cover that. Otherwise, you're probably going to find yourself in a position of, I've got to figure out other alternative sources to be able to bring in funding. So how do you avoid asking too much? Just make sure that your campaign size is relative to the congregation. And going through a planning study or feasibility study can help you understand that.
That's one of the other questions too. That people were asking, does the approach, how does the size of the church impact the capital campaign or the giving efforts? Are the steps the same regardless of the size? Is a church of 10,000 take the same approach as a church of 150 or 500?
Well, the smaller the church, probably the better you know everybody and the quicker you can get to everyone, right? So
Yeah, right.
the magnitude of the size of your congregation is a dynamic that is going to play into the terms of your campaign. Is this a 2-year,
Yeah.
5-year? What does this look like? And we got to be able to mobilize. Here's the other thing: we work with a lot of churches that are international. So yes, they have.
Yeah, we do too.
They're local, but they also have satellite churches they've planted, and then they have an online church that is growing in droves. And those people, I'll tell you what, I'm running a campaign where we've got people given from literally all over the world, and they see themselves as part of your congregation. They show up every single week. They want to be a part of that community, and they want to sow in. So
we see that too a lot. We see people giving, from all over, that maybe even attend churches online. That's a big deal.
Yeah. There's a follow-up question I just looked at that asked, can you explain what a wealth screening is and the value of that? Wealth screening, and a part of the planning study that we do kind of incorporates a wealth screening, which is typically looking at a lot of different public data that's available to you in combination with your giving, your file, and looking at that and pairing that to see what the capacity is of your file at different levels. So, you might have 5 people that can give over $100,000. You might have 30 people that can give over 50,000. It's all taken from public data and the data that you have within your own file. So that's quite possible. That's I know at Dunham we do that. I'm not sure if you guys do that at SecureGive, but that's definitely something to take advantage of, especially if you have a bigger campaign and you're not sure what your capacity is. Yeah,
and that is something. Something we work with churches a lot is understanding their congregation, the different dynamics. People, different age groups, different generations give differently. We try to coach on, understanding their congregation and, how their people are choosing to give. Here's a follow-up to that question real quick. Can you explain what a wealth screen is and the value of that? Does Dunham do it?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of going into a little bit. Erik, you can kind of explain our process a little bit more if you'd like.
And we do it. So there's just third-party providers out there. They all, for the most part, provide the same services. And at the end of the day, it enables you to take your file, upload it to a system, and it spits back, well, probably more data than you ever want to see. But the reality is what we try to do is we just try to understand who are the people that I need to narrow the search down to. And these are the people I need to have my first conversation with. These are my people I need to have my second conversation with. And you can break it up based on, yes, what their giving history is, which is not wealth screening, but I marry it with wealth screening. So I understand who you've given in the past, what are you capable of giving in the future, and then how do I build a relationship and cast a vision so that that constituent would say, yes, I'm interested in being a part of this going forward. But wealth screening at its core is nothing more than going to a source for publicly posted information that we're able to collate down to understand a donor's capacity.
Guys, I want to do a time check real quick. We're getting real close to the end here. I do want to get this question because it came up multiple times. Of the 43% that hired an outside consultant, were they able to bring in more money because they used a consultant compared to not having a consultant?
I can tell you this, when you don't have a consultant who's there with you in the trenches on a day-to-day basis, working with you in the fundamentals of fundraising, you oftentimes find yourself going awry from the plan and the execution that you want to execute on for the campaign. And so having somebody who can be your right hand, that can hold up Moses's arms, if you will.
Right on.
Make sure we all get across the sea together. It's good to have a partner in the trenches who can keep you focused on the fundamentals, but they also can keep you focused on the plan and how we're going to articulate things.
Right. I would just add to that, even down to the fact that somebody needs to be identifying within your organization who can do different responsibilities. And I've just found it to be, even in my own campaign at my own church, it's nice to have outside eyes looking in to go, hey, this person has capacity, this person has skill set. That's probably one of the harder things is staying focused because you've got so many other priorities when you're running a church. You've got so many different programs you're trying to execute. So the thought of like just trying to stay ahead of the campaign itself is a big task that needs full-time attention.
Yeah. Hey guys, just real quick, I'll close this out here, but I do want to make sure, how would people reach out to you, for a strategy or just capital campaigns or any information on that?
Dunham and Company, our website, we have forms you can fill out. You can also reach out to me. I'm Erik Rogers. So erogers@dunhamandcompany.com. And he is our lovely Jonathan Pitts, jpitts@dunhamandcompany.com. So we'd love to share with you our thoughts. And if we're not the right fit, point you in the right direction.
Right on. Yeah, and likewise, if you want more information on this, copies of this, we're gonna share the slides on this. If you need information about any topic, or if you just want to evaluate, how your church is handling online giving, I'm gonna tell you, we're as good as anything you would ever find. Our team is incredible. We love churches. It's what we feel called to do. I would highly encourage you to reach out to somebody on our team. You can email grow@SecureGive. Any of us would be willing to help you and serve you. Guys, really cool talking with you. I love doing this project. I'm excited about the data. We're going to share it out with everybody. That's really it. Hey, don't typically close this way, but I'm the COO, so I can do what I want. I'm going to pray for us, and we're going to finish. We'll wrap up today real quick. God, thank you so much for all of the churches on today's webinar that we can serve them. What a privilege. Lord, talking about money can be strange, but we just want to be good stewards of what you've given us. We want to be good stewards of our church body. And we recognize, we put all this strategy in this, but it is you that can do all things. You can move the mountains, Lord. We don't want to lean on our shovel and pray for a hole. We want to bring our very best and ask you, Lord, what will you do with what we bring? I just pray for everybody here that you would bless their congregations, protect them, protect their ministries. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, my friends, I will see you on the next webinar. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. I hope we get to have a conversation with all of you real soon. Have a great rest of your day.